John was a trucker who had been driving on the same highway for years. He knew every curve and every bump on the road like the back of his hand. But one night, as he was driving through a particularly desolate stretch of the road, he saw something that chilled him to the bone. In his headlights, John saw a hitchhiker standing by the side of the road, his thumb outstretched. John didn't usually pick up hitchhikers, but there was something about this man that made him feel uneasy. Reluctantly, John pulled over and offered the man a ride. As the hitchhiker climbed into the cab of the truck, John noticed that he was dressed in clothes that looked like they were from another era. The man was quiet at first, but as they drove, he began to talk to John in a strange, almost prophetic way. The hitchhiker knew things about John that he shouldn't have known. He spoke of events in John's life that he had never shared with anyone, and he seemed to know where John was headed before he even said anything. As they drove, John began to feel a growing sense of dread. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. But before he could do anything, the hitchhiker vanished into thin air, leaving John alone on the dark highway. Shaken, John continued on his way, hoping that it had all been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But as he drove, he began to see strange things on the road ahead of him. At first, it was just a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. But as he got closer, he saw that it was a figure standing in the middle of the road. As he swerved to avoid it, he saw that it was the hitchhiker, his face twisted in rage. From that point on, John saw the hitchhiker everywhere he went, always waiting for him on the side of the road, always disappearing into thin air when John got too close. John knew that he was being haunted by something far beyond his understanding. He could only hope that he would survive the encounter with the phantom hitchhiker on the dark, lonely highway. Sarah and Mark were on their way to a romantic getaway in the countryside. They had been driving for hours, enjoying the scenery and each other's company. But as night fell, they realized they had taken a wrong turn and found themselves on an unfamiliar road. The road was narrow and winding, surrounded by dense forest on both sides. The trees seemed to lean in, creating a claustrophobic feeling. The GPS on Sarah's phone was no use, it couldn't pick up a signal. They had no choice but to continue down the road in hopes of finding their way back to the main highway. As they drove, they noticed something strange. The same landmarks kept appearing over and over again. A particular tree, a signpost, a rock formation. It was as if they were going in circles. Panic set in, and they began to argue, blaming each other for getting lost. Suddenly, the car jerked to a stop. The engine had died, and they were stranded in the middle of the road. They tried to start the car, but it was no use. They were stuck. Sarah suggested they start walking in search of help, but Mark hesitated. Something about the road felt wrong, off, cursed. He tried to shake the feeling, but it only grew stronger as they walked. As they trudged through the darkness, they saw a dim light in the distance. Hopeful, they ran towards it, only to find an abandoned cabin. The door was ajar, and they cautiously stepped inside. The cabin was empty, except for a strange map on the wall. It showed the surrounding area with intricate lines and symbols, some of which they recognized from their drive. As they studied the map, they heard something outside. Mark grabbed a nearby fire poker, and they slowly opened the door. What they saw was beyond anything they could have imagined. The road had transformed into a writhing mass of limbs, tendrils, and teeth. It was alive, pulsating, and hungry. They could feel the vibrations under their feet, and they knew they had to run. They sprinted back to the car, ignoring the whispers and taunts of the road. As they drove away, they saw a figure in the rearview mirror, standing on the cursed road, watching them go. They never spoke of that night again, but the memory haunted them for years. They never took a wrong turn again, and they never went down a road that seemed too quiet, too narrow, or too deserted. They knew the road to nowhere was still out there, waiting for its next victims.